Welcome, everyone, to another episode of hashtag Real Talk with me, your host, or sometimes people know me as the guide to the foggy, crazy world that is information security. It has been a little while since we did a podcast. We had CloudCon and a couple other things going on, and work gets in the way. Those darn day jobs, we got to be able to pay bills, but obviously I work for an awesome company. So keeping my leadership's kind of happy. All right, I need to be quiet. Today's topic is we're gonna have a let's have a hashtag real talk around your identity journey. And what I'm very, very happy to introduce, and Matt, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name because, as longtime listeners know, I butcher last names, so I don't even say them anymore. Let me just be quiet. Please introduce yourself to listeners and tell them how you got into the crazy world that is information security.
Oh, and I was really looking forward to hearing you say or try to say my last name. But anyhow, I'm Matt Berzinski. I am a senior director of product management here at Ping Identity. I have been in identity management for over 26 years. I started out as a developer working on biometrics projects, and I've just evolved from there. And it's really one of those fields that has kept my attention. And when you think about the world today, it's very easy to switch jobs and switch things and switch interests, but the world of identity just keeps evolving. And I'm just so happy to be part of this industry and here to talk with you guys today and talk about, what identity can bring to organizations and how it can help them not only secure things, but make things easier for people too.
Cool. That's a great segue into my first question. So obviously healthcare, I'm healthcare security analyst. The biggest things that we're kind of seeing right now are around, both fraud and risk, right? In healthcare, we get the double whammy. We have money that's available, even though it's not a lot. Medicare doesn't pay us a lot. But there's also obviously, the risk part of it. What are you seeing out there with some of the main challenges of like your customers or in the industry in general when talking about real time, fraud and risk?
I mean, I think that's top of mind for everybody right now, whether you're in healthcare or whether you're just in general e-commerce or you're a workforce, right? And I guess healthcare kind of balances both. You're securing your nurses, your doctors, your staff, as well as securing your patients' access into data. And we all know with HIPAA, and we all know how, confidential patient data has to be. Fraud and risk is top of mind for you guys, just like it is for banks, just like it is for retail, just like it is for the government. And I think there's a lot of things that we need to think about with fraud and risk. And what we're seeing is, I mean, I can't believe I'm 2 minutes into the podcast and I'm going to say AI, but you have,
That might be a record.
I mean, you have AI out there, and AI is making fraud and risk so much easier for our nefarious actors. Because now you can use AI to generate phishing emails. You can use AIs to generate deep fakes. I know we've heard a lot about deep fakes out there. But take AI aside, you can buy a phishing kit on the dark web for 40 quid and $40, and you can actually at that point in time set up an adversary in the middle website that mirrors the website you're going to, so you don't even have to develop something that looks the same. It just sits in the middle. And so we're seeing a lot of organizations that are looking at, how do I protect myself against fraud and risk? The good thing is that the industry has responded, and there's a lot of tools out there that can help look at some of those things during the authentication journey. And that needs to be layered with like your web access firewalls and everything else that you have out there. But sophisticated attacks can get past that, and so you always want to make sure you have a last layer of defense. And so it's a huge issue across all industries, not just healthcare, but any organization that holds a lot of PII is going to be susceptible to fraud attack and somebody trying to get in. So I mean, it's probably one of the top two or three things on every organization's mind right now.
So in the olden days, right, you talk, it's funny, I'm gonna reference AI, but it's listeners, bear with me. It's in regards to what I'm about to talk about. In the past, we've relied a lot on knowledge-based authentication, right? Something you had, the RSA questions around, okay, you lived somewhere, and blah blah blah. Okay, or you took out a home loan, approximately what was there. Are you seeing that power of the AI almost making knowledge-based authentication obsolete because these systems are trolling the data, right? So if you have a public Facebook profile and we've answered all the questions, even though I tell my mother, who's 72 years old, stop that Facebook question and answering things. But are you starting to see AI being used to gather that data to gain the system when it comes to knowledge-based authentication?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, if you have a specific designated person that you want to target, it's very easy to train AI to go and look out across the internet and any place that that person's been and pull in their information and socially engineer their answers. Another thing that was really interesting, I saw in a stat last week, was that generative AI is so much more efficient at guessing what your password is based on what your past five passwords would be than any other technique out there.
Oh, snap. I never
Yeah.
thought about that. Okay, sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but it's relevant. Hear me out. Because I used to always joke, right? Like when this passwords have been compromised, this posted to the dark web and this, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Who cares? I've changed my password. But man, I didn't think about that from a generative AI point of view. You have a dark web database now that's full of Aaron's last 20 passwords, right? Is there a trend? Because there is. I'm not going to tell everybody what my secret is, but now that you mention it, there's a trend in how I do passwords. And obviously, I never thought about that. The power of AI to use compromised ones to be able to do a predictive pattern. Wow.
Yeah, I was kind of blown away when I heard about that too. But it as you said, it makes sense. I mean, we all kind of have patterns, I mean, and whatever they may or may not be, and wherever and the other thing is that I like to think of myself as pretty clever. I put special characters in the middle of a word to make it because it looks like a letter, or I have a passphrase that is like, the first line of my favorite song or whatever, right? However, AI can just pick up on that. And of course, for everybody out there who's, going, well, my first password was password one, and now I'm on my 10th password, and that's password 10. Obviously, that's pretty easy to guess. But, I mean, these are like generative AI to your original question. Yeah, it's out there. It's able to do that social engineering, and it's able to guess your passwords based on what's available on the dark web as well.
Francis is now upset, like, dude, why are you giving up my passwords to all your listeners?
Exactly.
All right, so we
Exactly.
talked about how, knowledge base isn't good enough anymore. Let's get into a little bit more than we're solving it with maybe document or biometrics. Where are you seeing success, right, in the move to doing like document based, biometric visual type of stuff? Because ping does have, I'm not doing a plug, sorry, I mean, I'm doing a plug, but I'm not like purposely doing a plug, listeners, sorry. But I mean, you have ping identity, right? And one of the things that you guys are looking into is more document based, biometric based stuff. Are companies starting to see the need? Are they having those kind of questions for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was really interesting. Our CEO stood up on stage last year and said, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, are you ever going to do identity verification, which is what you're talking about? taking a document and a biometric and a selfie and matching, and he would have said, never. That's not what I think we were going to be. Although, and I'm an identity management company, and now it just makes sense that we would do that, because how can you authenticate somebody and let somebody log in if you don't know who they are? And so we're definitely seeing that evolution come down to what we do at Ping as an identity management company. And you see that in a lot of different places, right? You see that in account creation. So, someone wants to create an account, a patient wants to create an account to check their records at your hospital. You have to make sure it's that patient.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do that online versus making them come to the hospital, and being able to do that in 2 minutes versus, an hour and a half, is very beneficial to you guys. But I'll give you a great example of a place where we've helped an organization in the past where they were dealing with contractors. And so you had contractors, and this was back in the days of COVID, and we all loved COVID because we could all interview for any job we wanted from the comfort of our home. We didn't even have to wear pants, right? You just had to show up with a shirt and you could interview for a job. The problem was that it was really hard to verify who you were. And so this one organization that we worked with, they had a problem where contractors were having top level contractors interview for positions and then sending lower level contractors in.
No shite.
Oh yeah. So I mean, it's a brilliant strategy from the contractors. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but for the organization, they're paying top dollar for a senior person and they're not getting that. So they actually implemented our identity verification solution so that the first time someone interviewed them, they had to do an identity verification. And every time they did an interview, they had to re-verify against and we've all heard about decentralized identity and digital credentials, but we issued a digital credential into their wallet, and they had to re-verify against that credential that we issued every time they did an interview to stop that fraud. And so it's really important now when you think about healthcare onboarding, you think about bank onboarding, and of course employment. And because we're still in the world of remote interviewing, no one goes to an office anymore. Like people barely go to an office to work anymore. So I mean,
In IT, mind you, in
yeah,
IT, nurses,
yeah.
people that are listening in are like, wait a minute, the nurses and doctors are attending versus Zoom, which I did forget to do a disclaimer. I do have to pause for a minute. Sorry, everybody, because my corporate com team is making me do this now with the new season. All the opinions, especially healthcare opinions, in this episode expressed by me may not necessarily be the views and opinions expressed of my awesome employer, Coral Health. Okay, I forgot to do that at the beginning. My apologies. However, that topic brings me to the next item that I want to pick your brain about. All of this seems complicated, right? So the re-verification, the new types, doing document-based biometrics, it leads me in the question, what are your thoughts around like orchestration? Because for a larger, well, I'll just use us, right? We're a base of I think 65,000 core employees, plus our, they don't call them candy stripers anymore, but volunteers and everything else, we're creeping up, close to 100,000 identities. That's a lot. So orchestration has to come into play. What do you talk with companies for when it comes to orchestration?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we think about all these latest and greatest technologies, and we always want our end users to adopt them, right? I mean, that's as security professionals, we're like, we understand this is more secure, this is better. The end user says, this is hard, right? I don't like this. I don't want to do this. And some of that is contextual based, like I don't have the device, I'm not in an environment, like you can't say my voice is my password when you're sitting on the back of a bus, like that just doesn't work. So when it comes to your question about orchestration is vital in everything we do in identity. And just for you listeners out there that don't understand what orchestration is, Orchestration is the ability to guide a user through any type of, I'll say, identity journey, but any type of authentication journey, any type of credential reset journey, any type of onboarding, registering journey. And the thing that orchestration provides is this contextual decision at every step of that journey. And so that allows you to be able to deliver more technology to people and more technology that they want to use. So if I know I'm trying to get a new user on board and they're on a mobile phone, and I know that people would rather fill out a 10 survey question via the US Post Office than on their mobile phone, I'm not going to ask them 10 questions to get them on board, right? I'm going to say, do you want to use your Facebook ID or your Twitter or Twitter's not even there anymore, X or LinkedIn or whatever, Apple? Do you want to use that to get on board? If you're on your laptop, I'll ask you 10 questions because you're more than happy to answer them. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other thing about orchestration is that I know what device you're on. I know what types of authentication are available to you. And more importantly, I know what you prefer. And that way I can offer that authentication to you. Because as I said, Aaron, I've worked in identity for 20 some years now. I got all the gray hair to prove it. And if you ever force somebody to do some sort of authentication, A, when every time you try to force anybody, that never works. And B, there's no authentication that works in every environment. So giving people choice and choice based on context, that's how you make all this available. So do I want to do document and biometric verification every time someone logs in? No. Do I want to even do it every time they try to change their profile? No. But if I go back to your first question about real-time fraud, and I see that this transaction looks really risky, and now they're trying to change their profile information, like their mailing address or the email or what have you, which is a first step to account takeover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I see the risk and I go, whoa, this is a really strange IP address. It doesn't look real. I'm going to ask you to really verify who you are. And in this, using orchestration, we can provide high security. We can understand the risk behind that and provide high security with very little friction or add friction as needed. And that's the thing, because I think we all think about defeating fraud and providing strong authentication is I'm always challenging you for authentication. Do you need to do a push verification? Do you need to push your watch? Do you need to do all these things? But really, if I have that real-time fraud there, I can actually sit there and say, I'm really confident that's you because it's your laptop from your network at the same time of day doing the same thing. I don't need to challenge you for all that stuff. I mean, here at Ping, I authenticate, like the only time I authenticate is when I'm traveling. Is when I, like, it'll say your session's timed out. Would you like to re-log in? And it goes through and it goes, oh wow, you're on your laptop, you're at your home, you're this, you're that, and it just logs me in because we have a really high confidence that it's me. And so that's the thing we have to think about is you can deliver high security without delivering a lot of friction.
Which one, I'll fanboy the watch thing in just a minute, but I gotta not lose my train of thought. Which brings me to something that my very first CISO talked about, like one of the goals that he always had, that, in the beginning days when I started this security journey 8 years ago, we just didn't have the means to do it, but it's getting better now, is he always liked the concept of security transparency, right? To your point, making it so you are being secure as possible in the most transparent way, so you're not causing that friction, because we do have the data, even internally to us, showing that, the more hoops you jump or the more friction, the less inherently people are going to be secure. It's just the way it is. That's no like industry secret. What you did blow my mind away is the multiple points of behavioral analysis. I love about you guys' product that I can be doing something in the morning, right? I'm working because I work fully, almost 100% remote. So I'm getting the youngest ready for school and everything. I say youngest like she's 7 or 8. They're older. The youngest older child, right? Ready for school. But the laptop's over there. I'm doing this. I do need to authenticate. The phone is on the table, the laptop's over there, but I can initiate something and then I get tapped, right? Is this you? Do you want to connect? And the watch, that user experience is so absolutely incredible, right? Because, well, people are like, why are you multitasking, Greg? Well, if you're a parent, you know why you sometimes have to
Sure.
multitask, right? I still got to do my job, but I got to make sure my kid is off to school. Otherwise, CPS is knocking on my door. But I never thought about the analytics part of that, right? So bringing it back around to stuff that you said. Now you guys know that, well, hey, generally speaking, if Aaron's doing something in the morning, you're seeing that tap, right? The initiation is coming from the watch. So I never thought about that. So right, that's not an abnormal behavior. Whereas building an alert out, okay, well, Aaron's, goes to Starbucks or our local one, Big B. Well, now Aaron's, in Northern California trying to tap from an Android device, I never thought about those different data points and how you guys can escalate. Well, let's do a second round of authentication because this may be you traveling, but this is not the norm. Are you seeing it? So, which brings me to another question. With organizations, are they understanding some of the value of orchestration that you're talking about, right? Like the importance of offloading that work, some of that work that you don't need to do it and you can focus on other stuff, relying on some of that analytics you talked about. So, tell me a little bit about our organizations understanding that.
Yeah, let me kind of answer your question, answer what you just said, because I think you said it really well. Of As long as everybody is doing what we know they generally do, we're really confident that that's that person, right? So one of the things that one of my and when you were talking about all that, it just brought it back to my mind is that we have a very, strong adaptive risk that we analyze the risk on every authentication or every user attempt. And everybody talks about that as if when the risk is high, we'll challenge you for more authentication. And somebody I work with said it to me so blatantly obvious, it just blew my mind, was you only know this product is working when people aren't challenged. It's easy to challenge. It's easy to say, look,
I like that.
yeah, I mean, it's
I will,
easy.
yeah. I well, I won't steal it word for word because I don't want to get plagiarism, but conceptually, that's right, right? That is
Yeah,
100% right.
yeah, exactly. And it blew my mind when he said it because I never even thought about it. And as soon as it hit my brain, I'm just like you. I was like, light bulb, right? So that's the beauty of what identity management can do. People always think security is a hassle, and it's not. It's actually an enabler. And security is an enabler for business. And I always say this, and you can say this however you want, but for me, it's like without security, the airline industry would be null and void. Like, would you fly on an airplane
No,
without?
God, no.
Yeah, right. So we all complain about how horrible airport security is, right? But none of us are going to get on a plane without going through it. Um, so maybe we need to make that experience better. On to organizations, though, and organizations are really interesting, and it's another concept in identity management, and something that you guys see in healthcare all along. But every organization has this, or every company has this. They have different partners that they do business with, and in healthcare, you guys have different doctors that are interacting with your system. You have different rehab centers or what have you. You have all these different organizations that have their own staff that need to interact with your system at your regional healthcare organization, right? And so, as opposed to you having to manage all of their employees, you can create these organizations where you can delegate the administration of their employees to them because there's no
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Okay.
because there's no way you guys are going to know when, Susie gets fired or Jack quits or what have you, but
Right.
they
Right.
will. And then it's up to them to figure out how to deal with that type of, how to adjust their permissions. And so what it really does is it gives you the efficiency of delegating all that off to somebody else. You don't have to deal with it. They can deal with it. They're closest to it. And then if you implement like a full-fledged identity and access management solution that has identity governance in it so that you can make sure they only have access to the things they need to have access to, which is really critical in healthcare when you're talking about patient data and these things,
100%. Yep.
or you're talking about segregation and duties, because I'm always trying to find the guy who can prescribe drugs and fulfill them all at the same time
We
because
call it EPS. And well, fortunately, all right. So we talked, we'll joke for a minute. We talked about like making security transparent. I will say one of the things that I do agree with government regulation on is there are stringent rules around e-prescriptions. And I
yeah.
just actually had to give requirements for a security requirements for a EPCS project. But you're not wrong. But that's the keys to the kingdom, right? You get like, you want to talk any kind of drug that you want. Yes, that is why we really scrutinize EPCS stuff. Okay, I got to be quiet. Sorry, go
No, no,
ahead.
no. You're good. You're 100% right. And it's like, and when we think about the identity governance stuff, we think about segregation of duties because I use the healthcare example of prescribing drugs and fulfilling them, but in a business, you could be able to issue a PO and fulfill it, right? And so
Yep,
now there's all
yep.
these. So when you look, going back to organizations, you have to certify people only have the access to the things they need to do for their job, for all the auditory compliance, HIPAA, all that stuff in healthcare and, GDPR in Europe and, Sarbanes-Oxley in finance. I could list a whole bunch of regulations, but also for business continuity. And with organizations, you can push that all off to your partners to do that because again, they're the administrators. They know who should have access to what. And so organizations give you that experience from an employee partner side. But if you're a large organization that sells under multiple brands or you have this, that, and everything else, we'll go back to the organization and an orchestration side, you can deliver a different user experience for each one of those brands. So you can have different graphics, you can have different pop-ups, you can have different
Oh,
whatever.
that is slick.
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
all managed out of one identity system. So having that capability really provides a whole lot of flexibility and efficiencies for customers, and that's something new in identity and something that's out there that's really we see a lot of interesting a lot of companies hugely interested in it right now.
Well, I mean, we would be our, my company would be a perfect, my employer, not my company. I don't own it. Would be a perfect example, right? Because we have our insurance wing, different branding, different name, and everything else under the corporate umbrella. And think about it. This is just two. How more powerful would that be to like a Unilever, right? How
Yeah,
many brands? 100 brands or whatever for like a
Unilever, Procter and
Unilever.
Gamble.
So
Yeah,
having the power of being able to present things differently depending on that little sub identity branch under your main identity is that's huge. And
and
also,
then
no, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, but on the customer side, you can link that identity across. So you can see every place that identity, every organization that identity's in. And so if you think about that, now you get a unified view of your customer. And so, God, I can't remember the name of the company, but it was one of those fitness companies. This was like 15 years ago. And they bought an identity management system so that they could see like if you bought these three programs, you're right to buy these next two, right?
Ah,
And so if you're a uni,
behavioral analytics again. That seems to be a
yeah,
common thing.
but it's like this unified view of your customer. So like if you're Unilever and you see somebody has an account in 10 of your brands, you know that you can probably say they're going to be interested in these next three. So being able to unify that identity and giving that 360-degree view or that holistic view of what somebody's doing amongst all your brands is super powerful. Like in healthcare. they're a patient, their insurance, they're going to this PT, they're doing, like, you can link all that together. It makes it so much easier.
Well, I sometimes I forget, because being in security, I'm always nervous about what data companies are collecting. But in that particular scenario, there would be a lot of security power in it for fraud detection, right? Like I would say that would be huge because you're seeing those different types of behaviors. That would be a good could potentially, right, be a good indicator of fraud. So another question, because believe it or not, we we're running we're still doing pretty good at time, but we are going long, and I already told you we were probably going long in this because it's a great topic. So we're not stopping at our normal point. Um, as we get more transparent, right, and newer technologies, and even like, my mother has a smartphone and stuff, are we going to get to the point where you start to see multi-factor start, subsiding ish a little bit, and then the power of single sign-on coming on, right? As we do, businesses do more APIs, right? And we have device-device communication happening now. Do you, is are we going to still have him? I guess this is bold, and you don't have to answer this as a representative of thing. This is just your thoughts only. So, Andrea, if you're listening, I'm making sure there's a delineation. Um, is multi-factor going to even exist in 5 years?
Yeah. But it's going to be like multi-factor is going to evolve, right? I mean, we're already seeing it evolve now. And I mean, the thing is you're asking me, is multi-factor even going to exist in 5 years? But yet I've been trying to get rid of passwords for 24 years, right? I mean,
Fair
I
point.
was, I was at a conference, in 2001 with a shirt on the back that said, forget your password, right? Because I thought biometrics were going to take over the world. And I'm still fighting that battle. And now you're
Yeah.
asking me, is MFA going to go away?
All right.
But
What's a way of answering a question without directly answering the question?
but you make a great point, and I think what you're going to start to see is you're going to start to see an evolution to digital identity and digital credentials. We already see states issuing driver's licenses. And what
Oh, that's right. I've heard. I'm like, I keep waiting for Michigan to do it. I know that sounds weird. I'm an
no, but
enigma. I like digital identity, but I'm also in security. I'm kind of weird like that.
yeah, but here's the thing, right? Think about the privacy that you get with a digital identity. So if you get a digital identity and you have your driver's license, right? And think about your daughter. I think she's only 7 years old. Mine's only 2. But think when she wants to go to a bar. Obviously, your daughter is going to be the most gorgeous woman in the world because mine's
Of
going to be
course,
too,
right?
obviously, right? And so when she wants to go to a bar and she wants to get in and the bouncer asks for her driver's license to prove her age, why does the bouncer have to be able to know her address and know her date of birth and know all
Oh
these things to
no,
stalk her, right?
shite.
So if I have a digital identity and I go, oh, bam, look,
Cap it.
I'm legal. It doesn't even say how old I am. It just says I'm old enough to be here. Like you can obfuscate so much data. You only have to assert what's right and what's wrong. And
I'm writing that
so
down, by the way.
so to your point, back to your question, will MFA go away? Yes and no. I think what you're going to see is a lot of digital credentials. And in the world of digital credentials, when you think about privacy, I can hold all of my data. I only give it to a company when they ask me to. I can determine whether or not they store it or not. But here's the kicker, and here's where it gets really interesting, is that in the perfect world, and maybe this goes back to me 24 years ago working for a biometrics company, biometrics is the most secure way to authenticate. Now on our phone, I can be enrolled on my phone, my wife can be enrolled on my phone, my son can be enrolled on my phone, and it always defaults back to a PIN. So I can't be sure that that biometric on my phone is actually me. However, in the world of a digital identity that's secured on your wallet, on your phone, that can't be tampered with, I can put, and we go back to that identity verification question you asked, I can put a verified identity biometric on your phone that you can now authenticate against. So now I know it's you, Aaron. I know it's no one else is on your phone except you trying to authenticate. And this solves that whole problem. Everybody wants to do biometrics, but they want to do server side. They want to store it. Who wants to allow people to store their biometrics, even though we've given them all to Google and Facebook because we put our faces out there? Let's forget about that whole argument.
Mm-hmm,
No one
mm-hmm.
wants to let somebody store their biometric on in a server in an organization. But if I can have it on my phone and an organization can trust that it's not tampered with, now I can go someplace. So where's MFA going? I don't know, but I really think you're going to say, I've authenticated to my phone. My phone knows it's me. My phone knows this is my digital identity.
It's
And now
with
I
you,
know
something
what
you have, right?
something
Of
I have,
one of the
something I
fundamentals
am.
of identity.
Yeah, something I have, something I am, and here's my username, and here you go. And now it's, I'm going to go back to COVID. I did not realize how many times the iPhone authenticated me until I had to wear a mask. And it's that easy and that fast. And that's where we're going to end up. That's my opinion, totally unencumbered by what my company thinks. But the
Yep.
way the world digital identity is going and the way MFA is going, that's kind of what I see.
Which might argue the reason why I'm 100% in your camp on that. And there's some people say, well, you can defeat Face ID and everything else. My argument back to those people will always be there is no such thing as 100% security. In spite of what, not your guys' marketing, but other market, there is no such thing as 100% security. However, probability and personal risk, your personal risk tolerance and probability. I don't lose my phone. I mean, back in the day when I wasn't used to it, lose my phone and stuff like that. The odds of a good hacker that I know, Chris Roberts, the kilted one, being outside in the vicinity to crack my Wi-Fi. I mean, come on, your average person, we're not that important. In spite of what you think, you're not that important. You're not a prime political candidate or, a celebrity or anything else. So likelihood comes into play. So I do agree with you. And that's why I'm flexible with that. And maybe it's because I understand, the secure enclave, like in the iPhone, right? To your point. We had to look into that when using Face ID. And the last time I checked, this may be old information. Nobody fact checks me. I'm putting a big disclaimer. It used to just say true, false. And to me, that's all you need. That it just totally verifies what you're thinking. It's saying true or false. It's not giving the app that's requesting it your biometric information. It just says true or false because when you set up Face ID on your phone that first time, you go through all the stuff, right? It does all the different angles and everything else. You have to have an inherent level of trust in something. I'm trusting my device, understanding that it's not 100% secure. So,
But no,
no,
now think
sorry, you
about
go ahead before I
yeah,
ask
yeah,
before I get to the very last question.
but think about that with the digital identity. So if it was your company or the government or a bank or some entity with a lot of trust who put that biometric in that secure enclave that can't be tampered with. And the only way that you can release your certificate to authenticate is to authenticate to that trusted biometric, not even the one that I did myself that no one watched me, but the one that somebody watched me do. Now I have a whole higher level of trust on that. And then the other
Yeah,
part
because
about
you'd have multiple steps, multi-layer security. Okay.
exactly. And then the
All
other
right.
part about that, and what gets really interesting is if I hold all my data on my phone, there's no more honeypots that are susceptible to people going to try to get
Yeah.
PII.
The likelihood of breaching that information is gone because it's not out in the
Because
internets.
but it's also not held in like a repository of 100,000 records. Like, who wants to try to hack my phone? As you said, I'm not that important. But if
Right.
there's 100,000 records there, somebody's going to want to hack that because there's 100,000 records they can put on the dark web. You get one record, that's
Right.
fraud's a business. right? The return on investment in that is not high.
Like it or not, the bad guys are smart and they're getting smarter.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So since we're running up against time, I want to get to the last one because I loved this concept. So to the listeners out there, in the podcast prep session, and I was going through different talking points, and one of the things that longtime listeners know we tackled a few years ago was the concept of robotic identity. And I had to laugh because um Matt had talked a little bit about the Jetson reference. So we're gonna close this out with that one. Um, can you talk to the listeners a little bit about your concept of robot or vehicle identity, right? Because as cars get smarter, it's a relation. It's going to be a relationship based approach, not so much an identity dependency. So why don't you talk to me a little about Rosie the Robot?
Yes, yes, good old Jetsons. And there's so many things in the Jetsons that are real now, like FaceTime, telephone, TV. You mentioned the watch. You can talk on your watch now. But the thing that I'm looking at now is that I think with the advent of AI, like everybody's going to have their own AI robot or bot that sits on the internet that can do what they want to do in the next few years. So if you remember Rosie the robot from the Jetsons, she would make dinner for the family. Well, if I don't, I'm not even talking about having a robot that can make dinner, but if I'm have a robotic personal assistant, I can say, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to be late. Can you just have dinner ready for my family at 7 o'clock?" And I don't have to say, order this, order that, blah, blah, blah. They know what my family likes. They know what in my area can deliver, and they know who can get it there at 7 o'clock, and it'll be there. And so that's easy when you're thinking about one person. That's my identity, and then that's the robot or the bot, and it does what I want to do, and I relate the two together. Where it gets interesting is if I say I have a robot for the whole family, which Rosie on the Jetsons was. And so now I have my wife who can use the bot. I have my kids that can use the bot. And so
Mhm,
now that my kids
mhm.
can use the bot, I need to enforce, different rules. So, my kid who's under 16, who's over 12 can charge $50 without me asking, $50 a day without me saying anything about it. Over that, I have to approve it. The one who's under 12, they can't charge anything, right? So there's a lot of things that you can set up. You can set up these rules, and that again, that all requires identity to kind of map all those relationships together. And then when you think about a car, when you mentioned a car, and you're out there in the great Michigan area where we have all these wonderful, fantastic car manufacturers, like think about a car, like you go buy like the most powerful crazy Mustang in the world. It's got 650 horsepower in it, and you're like, oh yes, I'm the man. And you're going down the
A Tim
street
Allen reference. Look at it, you got two Michigan ones there. Call out a Ford Mustang local car, and then Tim Allen though.
exactly. Exactly. So you're going down the street, you're burning tires off every time you go down the street. But your son says, "Hey, I want to take it to prom." And you go, "Great, here's the keys." But you turn the horsepower down to 150 and you say the stereo can't go over 85 decibels
Oh,
because he's
I
only
love
16,
that. I
right? So
love that
these are
idea.
all the things you can do if you can build relationships with inside identity, and that's like you talk about robots, and that's the future, man. And AI bots, you're going to be able to say my wife needs a birthday present, buy me something, or the AI bot's going to say, hey, your wife's
Something
birthday's
that
coming
she
up,
likes.
you should buy her something. But you also can look at the cars, and you can look at how you can relate a car to a person, to a family. And we have companies today that are, fuel manufacturers or fuel distributors, energy distributors, and they are looking at how do you tie a vehicle to a fleet organization, right? So there's a fleet that
Oh,
rented the vehicle, that has a driver that's allowed to drive the vehicle, and then when they come to a charging station or a petrol station, the vehicle actually authenticates to the pump, and then based on all those relationships, they know who to charge. And
now
so
that's
these
some serious automation. I like that. Speaking of the Jetsons,
exactly. And so That's what relationships can provide. And that's, you see, we all think about identity as, hey, are you the person or not? And there's all these things that we're doing underneath that, and I started this podcast by saying I've been here 24 years and I keep getting more and more excited because we keep doing more and more cool things. And it's the relationships, the organization, the orchestration, all these things are just, it's amazing where we keep going with this technology.
Excellent. What a wonderful way to end the podcast on a cool note. AI can be scary, but AI can also be awesome. It's going to depend on how come down to how we use it. All right, so we're to the portion of the podcast before I do a final thank you, Matt. Francis, I do want to say thank you to you and Andrea for one, finding me Matt, finding me a great guest to be on the show. Two, to help and raise money for a good cause. My listeners know I tend to do stuff for either around autism, Black Girls Who Code, stuff like that. This is my first non-human donation. So the charity that we're raising money for is the Frederick Meyer Gardens has a small little area that's Japanese based that has bonsai trees. And unfortunately, one of the people that runs or is in charge of that area passed away recently. And the other gentleman that helps out has started a fund to help make sure that these bonsai trees get the love they deserve and everybody can enjoy them. So again, first time doing a non-human fundraiser, but I very much appreciate it. Francis, in 2 minutes, besides all the wonderful things that Matt just led up to you, in 2 minutes, why should somebody take a half an hour of their day to give you a call to talk about the awesome stuff that you're doing at Ping?
Yeah, well, Aaron, thank you so much again for having us and your involvement and commitment to the cyber community here locally in Michigan. And honestly, there's not much I can say that can trump this conversation. It was a great conversation, hit a lot of different topics, and those are all things that Ping Identity is focused on today and into the future. So, honestly, if any of your listeners feel like they'd like to dive into these topics in more detail or learn more about Ping Identity, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of guys named Francis out there. Feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at francis.shirk@pingidentity.com, or of course, Aaron, you could connect us if necessary. But really appreciate you inviting us on, and was very entertaining to listen to.
Excellent. Or you might see him run around at Gurkhan, and so you could bump into him at
Sure.
Gurkhan and say, "Hey, I want to have a broader conversation about Matt's concept of the Rosie the Robot." So, once again, Matt, thank you very much for this awesome conversation. I appreciate you being a guest today.
Aaron, thanks for having me. It was more fun than I can imagine. The only thing that would have made it better was a beer in my hand, but it was a great time. And if you ever want to have me back, I'm here. It was good.
Excellent. All right, everybody. As always, we end the podcast with be safe out there. Have a great day.